Providing bite-sized pieces of subject matter online for students gives the students an idea of what that topic is about.
I just love the concept of the study. I love the idea that we're putting the learner at the centre, that we're saying, okay, here's information. Is it any use to you? Maybe it's of use to you. Get yourself stuck in, and it's a very positive way of looking at supporting learners.
It was great to have to hear the tutors' voice and to go over everything. For me, I couldn't write down the notes quick enough in class. So then when you hear something, it would help you remember what actually went on in class. So it helped you with what you had to do.
Yeah, it was much easier, especially when I was doing my exams in technology. I went on to Quizzle that one of the teachers sent some videos on, and I was able to flip the cards and learn what it was about, and that it gave me the confidence to do the exam.
It's much easier. It does help. It's great to have the tutors, but it is great to have the videos when you're at home trying to get the homework or it wakes your brain up a bit, whatever. It keeps you focused on the thing, you know.
You know, even from talking to learners about how having access to learning videos has changed their sense of readiness when they come into class. And, you know, you were talking about, you know, students' confidence being so easily knocked. And for them, it's like they've had a heads up before they come in. They've got the video, they've had a chance to listen to it, they've heard these words that, you know, are new to them, so that when they come into class, they're not on the back foot. And you can see, I can see that in students.
Hi, I'm Rory Clark. I teach woodwork, maths and technical drawing. When you were saying about the confidence, I was thinking of like the old sports analogy, is that of winning being a habit and so is losing. And like it's when you can just keep the momentum and just to keep it moving.
I really like the study skills on the Study Hub.
Yeah.
I think they're a real resource for people, that they're a great start. Like even as a student myself, you're going back in and looking at those study skills.
The idea of using videos to help me out was slightly strange at first, but once I watched one and realised I could complete a maths question after watching, I continued watching it. I can safely say I would have never passed maths without these videos. They were clear, understandable, and the perfect pace.
Oh yeah, I think the videos were great and they're a great help. And then when you come into the class, you were more able for the class because you looked over your videos. I think it really stood to me.
Yeah, it has given me a lot of confidence on the computer.
We believe that investing time in these digital innovations really puts the learner at the centre of the learning experience.
Thank you. Thanks a million. Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Hello everyone, you are very welcome to our launch today of our ALISS Study Hub. I think most of you know me at this stage. My name is Kathryn Orr. I'm one of the team of AEOs and APOs here in Further Education and Training. My job today is to act as MC, so you will be hearing a lot less from me than usual, and you'll be hearing a lot more from our guest speakers, which we're delighted to welcome. Was Ken Seary, our FET Director, and Róisín Doherty, who is the Director of Learner Support with SOLAS. That video was a video of some of our students and our staff reflecting on their experience of using digital technologies and using Study Hub resources. And I think it's fair to say that our students there, Tina, John, Rosie, and our Youth Reach student, as well as our teachers, Rory, Joan, Jodie and Fiona, gave a really good insight there into the possibilities of the Study Hub. So you're all very, very welcome to our launch this lunchtime. We're very excited, as you can tell, to be here. Just a very small few pieces of housekeeping that I've been asked us to run through before we get into the launch proper. Just to remind you that there will be a link to the Study Hub in the chat, and the recording obviously of today's launch will be available right after we finish today. Most importantly, there is a Q&A function there on your top right button, so please do pop any questions or comments in there. Ashley and Wendy will be keeping an eye on it as usual, and hopefully we'll have a little more time in our launch, hopefully if we get there later on. So my first job, and it's a great pleasure, is to introduce our Director of Further Education and Training, Ken Seary, and Ken's going to introduce our launch today. Over to you, Ken.
Thanks a million, Kathryn. You're all very welcome today, and I was delighted to be asked to launch this program and share a little bit with you on it. So I first came across this quite a while ago. I know our colleagues in Neve and the Adult Learning Centre in Bray developed a lot of materials and started to work on a platform as part of a Erasmus program, I believe. So that has evolved over time, and it's now become ALISS. I had to look up the acronym, I have to admit, but it definitely is a good one because it's Accessible Learning Integration Support Service. And what it is, and I know Kathryn will take you through a tour of it in a little while, but what it really is a central repository and support for people who have difficulty learning and who need the supports of the ABE service. And it's kind of a way of containing all of that information and making it accessible to everybody, regardless of whether they can access the ABE service or not. So there's some hugely beneficial tools in it. And I think over time, when I was chatting with the team yesterday, their vision for it is to expand it and make it far more relevant and far more available to a broader depth of people. And I think its idea is based in universal design for learning, and to make sure that all of the activities that we take can reach those broadest range of people. And so the supports and infrastructure that will go onto the ALISS platform will help both learners and teachers and instructors and tutors with resources to ensure that they can reach as many people as they possibly can. So it's a brilliant initiative, and it's been really well executed by the team there. Kathryn has taken it now from a kind of idea and a basic concept and something that was there uniquely for Bray, and has grown it and expanded it out to be a resource for all of the ETB. And we're going to put it up on the website, and it's going to be accessible for anybody, regardless of whether they're in Kildare and Wicklow or whether it's a much wider thing. So I'd like to thank Kathryn for that work that she's done on it. But there's been lots of other people that have really helped this come to be. The PD team and Kathryn Byrne for facilitating it and helping and assisting with all of that. For Neve and her team came up with the original piece of work and have been involved in growing it and developing it. And then there's been lots of colleagues that have put content on it, and Fiona Bradshaw has looked at the early learning and childhood care, so that's in there, and it's a good example for us to do it. So thanks to Fiona for that work. And then a lot of colleagues have contributed, and they've looked at it and reviewed it and given feedback to Kathryn as well. So a big thank you to everybody that's participated in it to date. And I'm really looking forward to seeing it growing and becoming a really good resource for us all to use in this ETB and then broader to other people. So well done to all the team, and I'm delighted to be here for the launch, and I'm really looking forward to hearing the feedback that people have for it. And also a thanks to Róisín, who's going to come in a little while and give us a national perspective. So thanks everybody, and I'll hand back to Kathryn now for the next piece.
Thanks, Ken. Can I also say just to thank you, Ken, for your support as a director, because it makes our roles a lot easier, because we are given the freedom and the autonomy to really identify what our learners need and what we can best do to support them. So that support is very, very much appreciated. A couple of weeks ago, I sent an email to Róisín Doherty, who, as I'm sure you know, is the SOLAS Director of Learner Support. And I asked Róisín, would she at all be willing to consider coming and speaking to us at our launch? And of course, those of you who know Róisín will know that she was immediately on board and hugely supportive in our preparation really for today. So we are thinking and asking Róisín here today was we felt it was very helpful to get a national perspective and a wider context for the work that we're doing here in KWETB. I think it's been an amazing few weeks in terms of the developments in the sector with the launch of the 10-year adult literacy for life strategy, which I think is a huge stride forward for the sector, and obviously something that Róisín spearheaded. So we are absolutely delighted to welcome Róisín here. And without further ado or further comment from me, Róisín, I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Kathryn. Everybody can hear me there okay? Yeah, great stuff, great stuff. Well, when Kathryn contacted me, not only did I say yes, I sort of tried to take the hand off her, because I was absolutely honoured, I have to say, to be invited to such a prestigious event. I was saying it when I come on there at the beginning, you know, I'm really lucky that you share with me the success that you have here, given that I had absolutely no part in it, and that's really generous of you. But I have to say, this is really the highlight of this and yesterday, and the launch of the strategy is my 3 top highlights of the year, because this is what it's really all about. And I'll try not to talk for too long, because Ken sort of knows me, I can talk for a long time, but I am going to try and focus on, you know, where this is placed in where I think, you know, the national situation is sitting at the moment. But just, I suppose, just to introduce myself, as Kathryn said, my day job, and I say that my day job, and sometimes goes to the evening, is inclusion learner support, but it's really just all about further education. Sort of worked in the sector now for 26 years, and sort of been around a few counties up and down the country and that sort of stuff, so I have a fair idea. But that's what I'm sort of learning as I go on in my life, is that that's just one aspect of it. You know, the other aspect of it is, you know, I have 3 teenagers. I have to do a bit of part-time farming and put in sheep. I have to be a taxi driver. I have to work and support my local school. I have to work and support my local GA and my soccer club. So I suppose as I move, and that's the way it goes, you know, as you move, you know, from sort of the start of your career to the end of your career, you sort of say to yourself, you know, what contribution can I give, and what can I give back into my community and the children that are coming on and the communities out there. And I think really what's really particularly focused my mind is, you know, when I was working on that adult literacy for life strategy, it gave me an opportunity to get outside the box. So I now, when I look at inclusion and I look at supports, I don't just see it within the sector. I see it is that, you know, 1.2 million people can't access any of our services. Well, not any of our services, but have limited access to our service because they don't have the skills. They don't have skills that can allow them to do that. And they're not going to rock up to do maybe even an adult literacy course when they don't have that skills. 50% of our population hasn't got basic digital skills. So that means, you know, we're again then, I suppose, isolating significant numbers of our population. And myself and Kathryn talked earlier, you know, that's not just, you know, somebody else's, you know, mother or somebody else's family. That's everybody around us. And I'm sure, you know, when the pandemic, we all would have known that. And actually, I was at a conference there on Friday with Age Action, and they're sort of saying with the demographics that's coming on, you know, in time, people won't have immediate family to help them. You know, I know my mother is able to rely on me to log on and get her property tax sorted out or whatever. But, you know, as that generation goes on and demographics change, that's going to be a particular challenge for us all. So I suppose that is, to me, has been the biggest learning point, that it's not just about inclusion within. It's about making sure that there's inclusion into further education and training and inclusion out. And they all sit together with inclusion for life. So, you know, when we're talking about servicing those with intellectual disabilities, it's not just about, you know, getting to a particular course. It's to make sure that particular course allows for transitions into a life that allows people to be independent. So that has been a learning point from myself. The other couple of things I've learned as well is that there certainly is a recognition that well-being and well-being frameworks is going to be a key priority for societies going forward. Scotland, Australia, Canada, numerous countries already now have a well-being framework sitting on top of the economic outputs, because, you know, with as we all know, with the pandemic, for, you know, health and all terms, particularly mental health, you know, if you don't have a well-being economy, you're not going to have a well-being community or a well-being further education and training centre as such. Now, again, I'm no expert on it. I'm just reading this detail because it's coming across my job, or I get the privilege and the opportunity to meet somebody that tells me about that. I conducted 66 bilaterals for the Adult Literacy and Numeracy Strategy, and it actually was one of the government departments that highlighted to me, if though I already knew about it, which I didn't, was that there was a wellbeing framework coming about. And actually, further education is going to be placed as one of the indicators for wellbeing for life, and that will sit on top of GDP measures. And Ireland, through the department of Taoiseach, has already moved to implement that, and it's in the programme for government. Also, if you Google OECD education wellbeing, you'll see that the policy direction for the next 20 years is to move towards a wellbeing framework to ensure that, you know, that the whole area of and I had a few particular notes on that, you know, the whole area of you know, civic engagement, what was the other little points there? I was particularly interested in them. Civic engagement, being involved in your community, being connected to your community, having security, having life satisfaction, and having a good quality environment and good health are actually the ingredients of good, successful further education and training. So I was only looking at that on Friday, and do have a look at it, you know, OECD Wellbeing Frameworks for Education. And they're saying that, like what you are really doing here, you are placing that resource on your website, that tool can be used for everyday activities, not just to pass a word processing exam or to do a particular activity, but actually to help you log on to get your driving license online, or to help you register your children for tax, or to be able to get some information about a bus online. So it's really inclusion for life, and that was one of the real learning points for myself. I suppose just on another broader, and then I'll come down narrower then, another, and myself and Ken and 5 other vet directors plus ETBI sit on a further education and training programme board looking at learner supports. And one of the areas we were looking at was the UNESCO and the Sustainable Development Goals. And in them goals, they're saying the policy will be to leave no one behind. And that's why Finland and Norway are so successful. I was speaking to them and they said it's not because everybody over there is smarter, it's that they make sure that people aren't left behind, and they move everybody up to ensure that everybody is included in the particular system. And UNESCO has said, and this is exactly what you are doing, UNESCO has said that the labellisation of individuals causes trauma throughout their life, the unnecessary labellisation, I should say. So, you know, that label has an effect, and, you know, affects you as you go forward. And as Ken said, what you're doing here is you're building this system on a universal design concept. And UNESCO and the Global Monitor for World Education is saying that there should be reduced labellisation, and that systems should be built inclusively. As the name of this particular resource says, it should be integrated and it should be accessible, and that there should be less need for saying that, Róisín, actually you're the problem. It's actually because you can't read fast enough, and Róisín, you're the problem because actually you're dyslexic, and you know, you have a problem. No, it's perhaps that maybe the system could be built a bit more inclusively, and I could be made aware that there's actually Grammarly available, and there's actually assistive technology, and there's a Mercer reader that could read to me. And it's not that the problem's with me that I can't read fast enough, albeit if I could read faster it would be better. If I got multiple methods of engagement and multiple means of content, as Ken says, the barriers would be reduced. So I think the whole ethos is reduce the barriers, and use are that example that you've reduced those barriers. You're making sure material is accessible. You're giving agencies to your learners to ensure that they have success for life. And I spoke to Kathryn this morning, and she was telling me the number of learners that you have, like 12,000 learners. But that's just not 12,000 learners that's getting your service. It's 12,000 learners with their mother and their father and their brother and their sister and their families and the granny and the youth club. And you live in that sort of community, you know. So the impact this has on mental health across the community. So you're actually ticking all those boxes on mental health. That's a bit sort of very broad. Then to bring it down, I suppose, into further education, as I mentioned to Ken and myself and four other directors, isn't it, Ken? 4 other directors plus ETBI are working on a programme board for learner support. And we do have, and I have circulated to Kathryn already, and it's free available there if Ken wishes to circulate. We have a framework for learner support, and really what we're saying is what you already have in place. Have a central hub to make sure everything is coordinated across, and build on those bases of inclusive design, of web accessibility, of inclusion built into the system, and that, you know, there's integrated mainstream supports for the majority of learners, that there's group supports for those with similar needs, and then you reduce the needs for individualized supports. So actually, you know, you shouldn't really need individualized supports unless you really, really need that. And if you talk to some of the advocates for learner supports, they would say no child, no adult wants to put their hand up and say, I'm totally different, move me aside here and put me in segregated provision so that I can get support for dyslexia. You know, no one really wants that. And what you are doing is building in those supports. So just on a national basis, as I said, myself and Ken are working on that programme board. And because there was so much detail, and I'll give you just a little bit of the flavour, because although I'm sort of smiling here and in good form today and I'm delighted, there's a really serious part to all of this. One motivated or two motivated, or the group here today, motivated individuals don't change a system. So we're very conscious we need systematic change. So the systematic change is brought in through the parameters document and through the funding arrangements. And what we do is we link with up to 35 government inclusion strategies, and we ensure what we can deliver on behalf of society is integrated into those strategies, and we link those strategies with strategies on the ground. And I'll give you one example of a new one that's in this particular year, because there's numerous ones. There's the Wellbeing Framework, Pathways to Work, Roadmap to Social Inclusion, the Women's Strategy, the Traveller Strategy. You know, numerous, there's 35 strategies and there is a list of them there, but a really interesting one that I came across just on Twitter actually was the Healthy Ireland strategy, and they have said that there's going to be 6 healthy campuses in higher education this year. So I've made contact with them and said, well, actually, could we maybe have, you know, 6 healthy vet colleges or vet campuses as well? So we've put that into the parameters, and the support will be available for that, so that you'll blend in supports even wider into the whole wellbeing agenda. So that's one. I'll give you a flavour of just a couple of ones as well. You know, we're integrating, as I said earlier, the UN conventions and the strategic, the UN Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities into it. We're implementing universal design. We're again launching now very shortly, developed by the sector, you know, the ESOL guidelines, the initial and ongoing assessment for level 4 to 6, the intellectual disability supports for the adult literacy services, and the numeracy report that we launched last week. Also, again, we're putting targeted supports in for targeted, I suppose, I don't like to say priority cohorts, but they're actually underrepresented, underserved communities and cohorts. And we are particularly paying attention to that, particularly in and around the comprehensive employment strategy. You'd be aware of the literacy and numeracy strategy. Then we're working with the head to develop assistive technology tools, which will allow you to have an assessment to see what supports you could have on assistive technology, and we're funding that. Also, we're working with the NDA and the Irish Computer Society as part of the literacy and numeracy strategy to put in place, I suppose, information seminars for web accessibilities. Then I suppose linking that to quality assurance, obviously the learner voice, we've covered that, and ultimately, and this is really a very important point, which I learned about 5 years ago, you can put all these supports in place as much as you want, But the one person that is the most important influencers of the quality of education actually is the tutor, the person that the learner makes contact with. So that is where we really need to support and make sure there's, the CPD is available, because across government systems and systems worldwide, the highest indicator of a quality assured system is not about the documentation, it's actually about the quality of the teaching, and I think that's particularly critical. Also, as you know, across the country we put in the 50808 number, and I think that's been a really good success. Again, that was picked up because I noticed it was in higher education, and that's the benefit of having this department now that's looking at the both. When that's launched, you were able to sort of say, well, how could we get that into our system? And I know that's now in place in every ETB, and we have the Mitigating Education Disadvantage Fund, and then one or two other interesting ones that we've been involved in this year. I've been asked to be involved in a Department of Equality Assistive Technology National Committee as well, which are looking at the World Health Organization and what's coming down through that strand. So again, I'll link that in. And another interesting one is we're working with the Department of Justice with regard to a joint Department of Justice further education initiative, where we'll be providing supports for victims of domestic and sexual gender-based violence. Also, we're working with Down syndrome, and the list goes on there. So really what I'm saying is, although you probably don't hear much from my team on a day-to-day basis, we're involved in those national approaches, and we're integrating those into the systems approach into the system. And I suppose the biggest influence I can have is through funding, and that once those are put into the parameters, and you will see the parameters as they come out, there's about 30 different initiatives in that particular area, it gets rolled down into each ETB, and I suppose that's really where the heart of everything is, isn't it, really, in each ETB. So that just really leads me on to just one particular thing before I just finish up. I have to get this one in, is that I mentioned there about the inclusion into, through and from further education. I was talking to the further education system in Finland, and they said they've spent a long number of years looking at learner support to find out that they just couldn't manage it themselves. And what they done was they said, we didn't open up our doors. We should have had the support organisations in our community coming in providing joint support. They said we were providing supports for some, but some who needed like one-to-one, maybe coaching, maybe mentoring, particularly if you've dropped out of school, when you're 13, 14, and we have those supports in Youth Reach, but making sure those supports follow the individual through their life and linking in with the youth clubs, the Feroigas, the NDAs, the children's committees, the partnership companies, the HSE, pull all of those services in and set up a regional group and pull them into your system. So don't just, rely on yourselves, rely on the other organisations in your community to come in and provide those supports in the courses, in the training courses. And they said that is the way they really realised that they couldn't manage it themselves. So I thought that was a particularly interesting one. And that follows me on to a second last point, is about high expectations. They say, and I think Ken mentioned it, he mentioned there about early years. Again, now I'm no scientist or researcher on this, but just from the research that I read, high expectations. They say by the time you're 7, you know what your expectations and you've seen how people treat you and how people value you and see where you're going to be, your place in life. So actually, we have to do all that we can to reach out through family learning to ensure we reach into those schools, to ensure that there's visits into those schools, to ensure that they can see role models that are in their community, doing jobs that are in their communities, because they say the biggest impact in a child's life is their perception of themselves. So we must have high expectations for every child, because they say by doing that, you identify and remove the barriers and you try and counteract the prejudice and the bias in the system to ensure that every learner can succeed, and that you don't put a lid on it at the age of 7, because when you put a lid on it at the age of 7, no supports when you're age 16 is going to change your mind if you've already been told for the last 10 years that you're not really very good and you're never going to succeed, and no one belonging to you ever really succeeded either, so really why bother trying? So anything you can do to reach out your supports into that family learning as well would be as you know yourselves, would be critical. So that's just a few little comments, and now I believe I have the privilege and honour to officially launch this fantastic hub, and I'm delighted to do that, and congratulations to everybody. And I'm now going to hand you over to Kathryn, who's going to take you through some information on that. So thank you all very, very much.
Thank you so much, Róisín. We're so delighted that you could join us today, and really inspirational words, and so great to hear from you about the national perspective and how it hopefully fits in with what we're trying to do here. So thank you very much. So I'm going to share my screen now. Bear with me. So the Study Hub is an ALISS initiative, so I just want to briefly introduce you to the ALISS service and talk you through a few things that it's up to, and then I will take you on a little quick tour of some resources from the Study Hub. So ALISS is a learning and language support service for all KWETB FET programmes. It was developed as part of the social inclusion measures within KWETB's Strategic Performance Agreement with SOLAS, and it dovetails with many of the objectives that Róisín was talking about in the SOLAS FET strategy and the Adult Literacy for Life strategy, which was recently launched, as Róisín mentioned. So what is ALISS's role? There's two main aspects to the role of the ALISS service. Firstly, around common initial assessment, and secondly, integrated supports. So on the common assessment approach side, it's about collating, bringing together and building on the existing fabulous expertise and good practice that's being carried on around all FET centres across all of KWETB to get that consistency so that all learners are getting a similar experience, and to support a consistent learner-centred approach for assessment of the core skills. It's really working with learners, a collaborative experience, so that they can be supported to identify the wealth of existing skills and experience that they're bringing to their new course, the best course pathway to meet their current needs and their goals, and any learning supports they'll require to assist them to be successful in their studies. So we've been busy, work is well underway on this common assessment approach, and a working group has developed a fantastic set of digital and paper-based resources, a common assessment pack of locally devised assessment resources which can be contextualised for your local centre at QQI levels 1 to 4, and that's being piloted throughout all of KWETB this year. Also, completed recently is a digital assessment for the new ELC Early Learning and Care programme. We worked with expert childcare practitioners and English language practitioners in the development of this digital assessment, and this will be piloted in centres who have are rolling out the new ELC programme this year. And then we're moving on, as Róisín mentioned, that soon to be published report for the assessment of the core skills in QQI levels 4 to 6, and so we're looking at a common assessment pack and resources for those people who are undertaking courses at levels 5 to 6. On the support front, we're exploring a 3-strand approach. In an ideal world, supports would be so integrated in the curriculum and the rollout of the programme and resources that fewer and fewer people, as Róisín mentioned, are going to need to go to those standalone supports. And the idea is that anybody that needs a standalone support, that it would be embedded and timetabled within their course, and they don't need to go to a separate centre to avail of the supports. So around that discrete learner support, this year we're piloting across all programmes in 2 FET centres, Wicklow Town and Athy, and the provision of timetabled tailored support classes, both online and face-to-face, around those core skills to make sure that learners get the best out of their course and have the best learning experience. So whether it's literacy, numeracy, digital skills, or English language, or just brushing up return to learning and study skills. Then secondly, the development of a professional development training to look into and share our experience and expertise amongst each other around accessible teaching and learning methodologies, and broadening out the curriculum and making it so inclusive and accessible to a wider range of learners. And then thirdly, we come to the idea of the hub. So if you can't get to a support class, or you just need to brush up in a particular area, that you would be able to access Study Hub resources yourself in this easy link. And that was part of the joy of meeting learners and educators when we were putting the video together, was to see them really grasping that idea of learning independently themselves when they had the time and the space to work through materials at their own pace. So that's really the idea behind the hub. So just going to take you through a few of the resources that are on the Study Hub. So there's 5 sections there at the minute. The study skills section allows people to just brush up on those core skills that are so vital in no matter what course you're doing. Then there are writing resources. There's a digital skills section, which we're going to develop out about all those digital skills that you need for accessing your course, logging on to your online course, uploading and downloading. And the improve your English section, which currently directs you to the original kind of iteration of the Study Hub, which was the Bray and Wicklow Adult Learning Centre website, and hopefully we'll be able to transfer those to the Study Hub over time. So I would just like to show you a selection of people have been so generous with their time and their resources. I'd like to just show you a few of the resources that are up there on the Study Hub. So these are digital books for beginner English language learners, and indeed learners who are moving on with their English. They're so difficult to find anywhere because these are localized, contextualized for our individual learner demographic, and they've been developed by Wicklow and Kildare tutors. So I'm just going to dip into one of them. It is a book created by Sheena Groom, a Kildare tutor, and it's all around that workplace vocabulary, getting learners familiar. They can follow the link to this book. They can read it as many times as they want. She's provided a voiceover. I'm not sure if I enabled my sound. Apologies if you can't hear that, but she's provided a voiceover to make it as accessible as possible, and really learners can just get very familiar with that vocabulary over time. So that is the readers. Next, as Ken mentioned, Fiona Bradshaw, a course coordinator in early childhood care and education in BIFI, has looked at supporting learners who are interested in the early learning and care sector, and they may be fantastic and very confident in their and very experienced, but the whole new language of the module and having to undertake assessments can be heavy going when they're returning to learning. And so she's really pulled out a lot of the difficult terminology and the legislation, put it into a very accessible format, and it's a fantastic resource. And so she has interactive videos and presentations, and then you can work your way through text, and then there are activities to kind of check your learning. So just wanted to show you one of the activities. This is a fantastic app called Quizlet. It's a set of digital flashcards, and I must say I learned a lot about childhood development and working with Fiona to develop this set of cards. It's got a voiceover, and you can work your way through the flashcards, and then you can test yourself. You can do the activities in conjunction with your class, knock each other off the podium, and it's a great way really to get very familiar with the language and just to support learners in that way. So that's Quizlet. And then talking about the language of a module, it's often people they take to the digital skills quite quickly, and then they get bogged down maybe in the terminology around the computer theory and a lot of the technical jargon. So this has been made by Joan Fitzpatrick, a tutor and resource worker at Bray Adult Learning Centre, really breaking down all of that computer theory and making it very accessible, and people can work through this in their own time and at their own pace. So there are explanatory videos. Joan has provided voiceover, lots of text, and then what I really like is that you can check your knowledge, you can test your knowledge as you go along. So this is going to be tricky, but so you can work through whether it's an input device or an output device, check your knowledge, and you can retry it as often as you like to really embed those skills and that learning. And then just finally, the final thing I want to show you really is I recently came across Rory Clark's, he's a tutor in Youth Reach in Arklow, his fantastic set of videos on technical drawing. They're so simple and clear. And as I say, I haven't got time to show too much of that, but they're very simple and clear, and students can go over and over them again and really get to know the language of the course. So just to sum up, because we're so tight for time, it's the Study Hub is a flexible tool that we can continue to update, and I really look forward to getting out into centres and having that conversation about what would be useful to put up on the hub, and just to collaborate with you to make this as useful a tool as possible. It's been a real team effort, and I want to thank our Chief Executive Deirdre Keys, Ken, Kathryn, Neve and Brenda, and all of you for really getting behind the ALISS initiative and the hub. So I'm going to hand you back to Kathryn now.
Thanks, Kathy, for that. I mean, I think you're right, Kathy. It was absolutely a 100% a team effort from all involved. Very easy for me to be part of the team with such dedicated, committed, and really very passionate educators as part of the team. So thank you so much for that. We have a couple of questions in, so I'm going to just two particular questions. I think we have in some fabulous comments in the chat as well. I suggest everybody go and have a read of them. Question one, Róisín, is for you, and the question is, it's a query around the assessment for assistive technology, and the comment is that it sounds really interesting, and the query is it available yet?
I don't think I've seen a demo of it. And if you follow Ahead Ireland, you'll see the updates that they give. I think they have a post up there at the moment about that they'll have some information now on National Assistive Technology Day, which is the 13th of October. So I as far as I know now, I could be wrong on this, but I think by the end of the year it'll be live. But I have seen a demo of it, and they have a very good advisory committee that's going through it as well. And yeah, it's a very good resource. And actually on Twitter as well, there's a few other organisations as well that have mapped like up to 70. Ashley will know more than me on this now, but they've mapped up to 70 apps as well that'll support you as well. I could find that link as well if need be. But yeah, Trevor Boland, isn't he, in the head? He's the man, really, assistive technology. But it is very interesting now that an interdepartmental group has been set up to look at assistive technology as well. I suppose we're looking at it to enhance learners' capacity and make it easier to learn, but I suppose, you know, from a wider perspective, assistive technology, and you can see it in the pandemic, allows inclusivity for those that may be excluded, particularly people with disabilities as such. So yeah, I think it's really going to be a huge proactive, positive approach. And I think the example there that why the interdepartmental group is looking at it is that, you know, you have one group of society saying, we want the right to disconnect, we're doing too much computer work and everybody's ringing us in the evening and all that sort of stuff. And then you have another group in society saying that, can we please, their campaign is the right to connect. can we have the right to connect? So it's a bit of a balance. So yeah, I think end of the year that should be available, as far as I know. Thank you.
That's great, Róisín, and I think it's so important to be able to harness the resources that are out there, so that learners can use them for their own interests, their own progression, their own focus. I think it's wonderful, and I think we've had great involvement here in the ETB with the heads through the UDL project. So I would reiterate everything that you've said there. It's a fantastic resource, and they're doing some phenomenal and really interesting work, and it's fantastic to see them so involved in FET after so many years with the focus on higher education. So that's amazing. Thank you, Róisín.
Just before you go off that particular point, that's again, as I said, the influence I have is funding. And my unit signs off on that funding, and they agree a plan with us every year. So, the UDL was a specific one, and then it expanded out to more initiatives. But if there's something you want developed, like, give us a ring, let us know. The funding's there. They'd be only delighted to do it. So, they are assistant, but it is, it's coming out of our own pot of money. So it's really good that we have that expertise, and people are delighted. And the other organisation we're working with is Dyslexia Ireland. I'm meeting them on Thursday to see, and I'm saying to them, what else now can you get us? What other systems and supports can you help us with? Because the funding's available for it there. So again, if there's anything you think we should be doing, just let us know.
I think it's so interesting that there is such a movement in terms of harnessing what's out there, in terms of that sort of networking and linking and making strategies speak to one another. I think that is phenomenal, Róisín, and we so appreciate that. And I think that throwing that open to the floor here, I think there will be definitely some responses for that, I can nearly guarantee. Okay, second question is Kathy. Okay, and this is a really interesting question, Kathy, and a very generous offer too. It's one of our team members who's saying that they have resources that they think might be useful and that they would like to share, maybe through the Study Hub. So how might they go about that, Kathy?
Thanks very much, Kathryn. That's a great question. I'm delighted to hear that, and I would certainly be really interested in collaborating with anybody who thinks they have something that would work on the hub, and just to send me an email. I don't know if somebody could maybe pop that into the chat. It's Kathryn Orr at KWETB.ie, and I would be really delighted now to work with anybody to support adding resources to the hub. So thanks very much.
Thanks for that, Kathy. Look, folks, I'm just conscious we've run over time, but it's been such an interesting conversation, and as always, I'm so inspired by what I've heard. And two things always happen to me when I hear, such kind of inspirational conversation. I want to, one, go and do a course myself, and the other, I want to get into a classroom and teach again, which is the highest compliment that I can pay, that an event like this, a launch like this, but we've touched on such a wide range of topics, and I think you can really get the sense of the enthusiasm, of the passion, and of the expertise, which I think is something to be very proud of in the sector. So look, folks, we're coming to our close. So I have the lovely job, which I actually really enjoy, of doing all the thank yous. So I want to particularly thank Ken, who's had to leave, and to thank Deirdre Keys, our Chief Executive, who sent her apologies today. I think she will be watching, she said, the recording back, which is fantastic. So thanks to Ken and Deirdre for their support, and again, that autonomy that allows us to be creative and be progressive and know that support is there from the organisation. It's hugely, hugely important. To Róisín for giving us the time. Róisín, I think you've inspired us today. I thank you so much for that. You've given us a huge amount of food for thought. I know we asked you to give us the national context, and you've done that, but you've done actually so much more today. So really, thank you so much for coming here and giving us the time today. To Kathy has done so much work here as our FET Learning and Language Support ALO. She has been the architect of our study hub, but the thing that she does so wonderfully and so effectively is she creates teams, and she harnesses expertise, enthusiasm, engagement from staff, and I know definitely students, and I think you have seen that today. So Kathy, I want to thank you so much for your work and particularly for your leadership in this. I know that today's launch has been supported very ably, because I can see them on screen myself at the moment, by Ashley Stevens and Wendy O'Sullivan, who are our crack team for our live events, and only for them we would be, I think, muting at all the wrong times. So ladies, thank you so much as always for the support. To the wider team, to my colleague managers, to our wider staff, thank you so much. Your commitment, your energy. People have turned up here today at lunchtime in such busy times, but I think that shows the interest and the commitment of the team we have. So thank you so much for that. Most importantly, most important people are our learners. We heard from some of our learners earlier. We heard from Tina and John and Rosie, and we heard from our Youth Reach student. But our wider group of learners are over 12,000 learners that we have. They're why we do this, but as Róisín said, and we discussed this earlier, they are us, we are them. These are people who are our community, our family, our friends. And I think the strength of the ETB sector has always been that we have had that very strong connection with the grassroots. So as much as we have our initiatives that are absolutely top down and showing great leadership, we also have those grassroots feedback from the learners, the learner voice, and facilitating that. And so I want to thank all of our learners in the ETB and beyond today very much. So all that remains for me is to introduce our final video and to thank you all so much for your commitment and your participation today. Thank you all.
Have you heard about the KWETB Study Hub? The Study Hub is here to help you succeed. We are launching a new online web page for you, our learners, in further education and training, packed full of videos, activities, study tips and advice to help you make the most of your learning experience with us in KWETB. You can use the Study Hub in class or at home. Use the resources to brush up your skills. Get tips to help you study online. Check out the KWETB Study Hub today.